Adam Thompson, what happens in court, and do these men get away with this sort of behavior?
Well, it's very unfortunate, but very frequently men get away with this behavior. When you have women that are subjected to this kind of conduct by a man, and it's a reoccurring situation, a battered syndrome comes into play. And to avoid the fear of future, conduct like this, they take the opposite. Instead of coming out and telling people what's going on to reach out for help, they actually, close up and just let it continue because it's embarrassing to them. They're in
the
fear.
Victims.
It's a shame, but that's really what goes on. I mean, when you look at this case, Charles Sassy is a guy who's used to being in control. He's a very wealthy man, huge in the advertising industry, a huge person in the art industry. And he thinks basically he might be above the law in his mind because everything he does, he's the boss. He's in charge. He doesn't answer to anybody. He does whatever he wants. So it's interesting when you did the lead-off into this story, when I was listening, you talked about how he made up all these excuses for everything that's going on. The bottom line is 4 separate times he grabbed her by the throat, squeezing her windpipe. He puts a finger up her nostril. He does all these things, and it's in public. He's not doing this behind closed doors. So your first thought is, wow, he's doing this in the open in a very well-known restaurant with people all over. There's always paparazzi here. And it didn't cross his mind like to be careful. Maybe someone will see me. He was oblivious. He didn't even care.
Yeah.
So what is he doing behind closed doors? It's got to spin your head. This really shows he's a true ad man. Hey, he's trying to put a spin on domestic violence. He's flipping it on her. Hey, I'm disappointed she didn't come out and say that these horrible things I did in front of everybody, which might, damage her reputation, my reputation,
and her body,
everything, cause physical fear and harm. But you know what? Hey, a good defense is a strong offense. That whole saying that they go, and that's how he's taking it. I'm going to go and I'm going to lay it out there, and I flipped it. I want the divorce.
Yeah, and also what he's in essence saying is, I'm more important than she is.
Absolutely.
Right?
Hey, listen, everyone saw what happened. There's no spin you can put on
None.
that. It's an act of violence. And he then files for a divorce 4 weeks later. It's incredible to me.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, but it is typical. Laurel, give us a profile of an abuser, because last week on the show, James, who's my producer, who doesn't really seem to know a lot about domestic violence and what the reality is, there is a feeling among so many people that when you are successful and smart and rich and or good looking, that you just don't do these things, that it just doesn't happen in places like that. It's people have this perception that it's poor people who do this, that it's not, the wealthy, the successful, the intelligent. Can you dispel some of that for me, Laurel?
Yeah, well, the statistics are actually quite clear about it. The World Health Organization has done a series of studies all around the world in rural areas and urban areas, and domestic violence in one form or another, physical, sexual, psychological abuse, is pervasive in a huge variety of countries. And we know in the United States, and we know from our own clients who come to us, we serve about 10,000 clients a year at Sanctuary for Families. We're located in New York City, and women of all ages and all ethnic groups and languages and backgrounds come to us. By and large, if they need to go into shelter, they'll be low income because they don't have an alternate place, funds to do the other. But we have doctors, lawyers, successful women in a variety of circumstances who will come to us probably for advice and counseling. And it's definitely clear from all of the studies that it's widespread across economic groups and, sadly, racial and ethnic and geographic locations.
Right.
It is basically about gender relations and about the view that men have that they have a right to be in control of women. And so it's useful for those of us working in the field for people to see the public story about a wealthy, prominent man like Saatchi, because it shows other women in relationships like theirs that, oh my God, this could really be bad. I better do something. And that's what we try to get that message across. Don't think you're immune from it. Although it is true, I would suppose, that women like Nigella Lawson are more embarrassed to come out publicly. I mean, she's a public figure on television. So.
Yeah, she's a very successful woman.
Right.
She is a big public figure. And so what about a woman in a situation like that who may feel embarrassed, who obviously has been living with this abusive man for some period of time, and it would shock all of us if this hadn't been going on for the duration of their marriage. She has herself spoken of growing up with an abusive mother who hit her and belittled her and so on and so forth. And so maybe there's some correlation between growing up in a home like that where you think this is just the way it is and this is how people show their affection for you or love you, and you now find yourself in a situation which is similar to the one that you grew up in, and maybe there's a denial there. What happens to the women who are victims of these abusive men? What happens to them emotionally, psychologically, and why is it difficult for them to sometimes get away from these men?
Well, probably the most important thing that happens is that as the abuse usually starts, or often starts, with verbal abuse, humiliating her, telling her that she's really worthless, she did this wrong, that wrong. He was arguing with her, Sachi. He's telling her that she's wrong about what their daughter should do. And
what her daughter should do, by the way.
Yeah, what her daughter, exactly.
Not his, but
so the woman starts, we find when we work with these women, the most interesting thing that happens in our work with them is when they start to talk to each other. Because what comes out is that each one thought, oh, I thought it was just me. I thought it was my fault. Because he told me, I'm overweight, my cooking is terrible, I don't treat the children right, I don't talk to your mother right. There's always something that he has told her, and usually a series of things, and often there has been, but not always, a background of the woman or the man having lived in a primary family like that. But the woman starts to lose her sense of self and of mastery and of value, and surprising for very successful women. And that makes it very hard for them to leave. And the other thing that happens is that the man says, oh, I'm sorry, I so sorry, I just, I was just upset with you because you were, but I won't do it,
Yeah, they diminish it.
They
promise not to do it
again. I won't do it again, and they kiss and make up. And look, women more than men tend to be very committed to keeping relationships and families together. A woman faces a big choice if she's going to leave. She has to consider the impact on the children of breaking up the family, even a successful woman. And for women who don't have much money, it's a huge step forward to be able to say, oh, my God, I no matter what happens to me. And we've had women say this to us. I don't know how I'm going to feed the kids, but I have to leave. We're going to leave.
How do you, in most of these cases when the guys are entitled and they commit these acts, do they ever change?
Well, I never like to say that nobody changes. Look, people get over alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all kinds of things. By and large, the studies, there have been a lot of studies in the last 20 or 30 years, and nobody has found a successful technique for
rehabilitating.
Changing men. And often, there have been anger management courses, but the problem with those is they're not beating up their bosses. They're just fighting. They're not losing their temper with them in their workplace. By and large, I suppose some men do change. They do see, oh my God, this is really terrible. It's me, not her. But it's unusual. Men largely don't change, and in fact, usually they're repeat abusers. That one woman leaves them, or they kill one woman, and they go on to kill another one or abuse another one.
Right.
So it is a serious social problem. We at Sanctuary for Families believe it has to do with sort of the fundamental concept of gender. Gender roles, men and women, and what their value is in the society, and that it's only when women really take responsibility and become an understanding that we are truly equal to men, that we're able to say, no, absolutely not. I do not deserve this. No matter how much I burned the dinner, I do not deserve to be belittled, humiliated, or abused.
Adam Thompson, when you're working in the legal system and you're working with women who have been battered and are victims of domestic violence, how do you work with them and get them to testify against their abusers? And what are the challenges that you have?
It's a very tough road because, as a follow-up to what you just were discussing, sadly, conduct like this repeats itself. If you grow up in an environment where, as a child, you witnessed this, where there's domestic abuse, alcoholism in the home, cases like this, usually the behavior becomes learned, even though the behavior is wrong, even though, if you discuss it with anybody, you understand that this is not the proper course of conduct for anybody. If you grow up in it, you're around it, and this is all you see, well, that becomes what you learn. And if that's what you learn, then you learn to accept it, and once you learn to accept it, that becomes a way of life. So it's trying to unteach someone what's indoctrinated in them, and it's very hard because you have to make them understand that not only is what's going on wrong, which a lot of times they understand that, it's moving on from what they know is wrong, and that's what's hard because, again, it sends a message about themselves. They think they're actually doing something bad because they're going contrary to that way of life they've been living. And then there's children involved, and they have
attachments.
A protection and an attachment to the kids. There's so many different levels of things that's involved here. What's scary about Saatchi is doing all this in public and then issuing statements that are just point-blank denials and then trying to spin it against her and then taking really what was retaliatory action against her. Well, you're not going to come out and cover for me and say that I really wasn't doing things like that to you. Well, I'm going to divorce you. And guess what? I'm not even going to tell you. I'm going to call up like a local tabloid.
Right.
And I'm going
to humiliate you.
I'm going to humiliate you. I'm going to let you read about it in the paper.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to tell you. I mean,
it's another version of slapping her in the face.
It says it all. But let me tell you, she is a self-made woman. Before she got with him, she had books out. She was doing things on her own. They weren't married till around 2003. And prior to that, I know she had some bestsellers out. How to Eat in like 1998, things like that, and a big book, How to Be a Domestic Goddess, 2000. So she's got to be thinking to herself, as humiliating and embarrassing as it is, she's a star, and she has a brand, and you never want your brand to be damaged. And a little segue, Paula Deen, I think she knows what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So, you don't need something like this, the domestic goddess. That implies household is happy, things are great in the home life, everything's peaches and cream, and she's a victim of abuse from a husband. That brand can go down real fast.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to see that happen. So, there's got to be damage control done. And I will tell you this, she's doing excellent damage control because she has one of the top PR people in the industry, a guy, Mark Hutchinson, and he's already out there. He represents J.K. Rowling, the author.
Right.
So he's out there already spinning information out there, to put her in a light favorable to the public. But even more important, she sent the loud message. The wedding ring came off. She immediately went and looked for an apartment, moved out, took the kids out, and then she lawyered up. And when I say lawyered up, she lawyered up as good as you can go in England. She got the attorney known as Baroness Shackleton, known as Steel Magnolia. And if that name doesn't ring a bell to you, just ask Heather Mills in the Paul McCartney case or Princess Di in the Prince of Wales case, because she represented them.
Mm-hmm.
And, she goes to court, she means business. So, Miss Lawson is showing that she's taking this seriously and she's intending to protect her rights and get what she's entitled to when the division of property comes up in this case. And she got as good a lawyer as you can get to handle these cases.
It's interesting because vis-a-vis the domestic goddess brand that she has, he's even now trying to take credit for that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's just pure nonsense because, like I said, she had books out and things already going on before then.
Of course.
And that's just another way of trying to get
to diminish her
over her. And
you're nothing without me.
You're nothing without me. That's exactly
I am superior to you.
Let me tell you, she's lucky that he announced it in the Daily.
In the mail.
In the mail, because if he did it in person, we might have had another incident with him choking her as he told her.
Oh, I know. I mean, this guy really takes the cake. He really does. He's one of the sickest. I interviewed O.J. Simpson for 4 hours, and during that interview, we talked about the night of the murder, and he went through what happened that night, and he told me he was going over to her house, as he frequently did, just to terrorize her. And the way he described it to me, it was as if, this was, of course, a perfectly normal thing to do. I used to go over there just to scare her and terrorize her. And this was, of course, after they were divorced and living separate lives. And it was bone-chilling the way he described it to me because this was fun for him. He was just going over there to slash her tires because, he just liked to get her upset and scare her in the window and do things like that because that's fun. He thought that was so much fun. And when I said to him, have you visited her gravesite? Yes. And have you ever talked to her? Yes. And what do you say to her? I curse her for ruining my life.
Wow.
That's what he said to me.
It's just mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling because it's her fault.
It's incredible.
It's just like Saatchi, though, because Saatchi, it's her fault. It's her fault that she didn't defend me for choking her. And O.J. Simpson believes it is his ex-wife's fault that he murdered her. And it ruined his life. The consequence was not he killed two people. The consequence in his mind is that it ruined his life.
Well, Nigella Lawson's in a great position because of her image as a domestic goddess, and now she's on that show, The Taste in the U.S. She has an audience, and this is a great opportunity for her to educate other people that are going through something like this and could really help advance this movement of domestic violence by saying, hey, look, you see me on TV. I have this big brand. I'm a wealthy person. You all know me, and this even happens to someone like me. And that might encourage a lot of people that are living in this kind of situation, because domestic violence does go both ways, to actually speak out and not be afraid to report it, to follow up on it, to take action and just stop it. And, because the pattern now, it's just a reoccurring situation. It occurs over and over, and it usually ends very badly, where something in a violent nature, way above what we're even talking about here, happens to either the spouse or the children, and you can't allow that to happen. You just can't.
Adam, do you see cases where the women are abusing the men?
I've seen both sides. So,
How
common is that?
Very uncommon. All the studies show about
15%
at most. There are loads of federal studies about this.
Yeah, it's predominantly, overwhelmingly the other way. But, domestic violence of any kind should be frowned on and should be ended. So that's what I'm saying. This is a good opportunity to educate the community and go both ways on it. And no better person to do it than her. I think she'll be taken very seriously, and they'll listen to what she has to say.
So,
Laura, is very important, though, I have to say. Putting this story on the show is a message to all kinds of women out there, including poor women and ordinary middle-class women who are looking at this story and saying, oh, my God, that could happen to her, and she got away. I need to get away as well. I mean,
right.
Highlighting this is so important, so women who are feeling so bad about themselves and thinking, oh, I'm trapped and, and shamed, embarrassed, and he says all these things about me, feel,
you need that trailblazer.
Maybe it's time to move.
You need a trailblazer, just like when no one wanted to speak about AIDS. I imagine Magic Johnson was one of the first people to come out and made that announcement when he was on the Arsenio show, and then, boom, it was over the front page of every paper. It hit the spotlight. People really began to talk about it because they're like, Magic Johnson has HIV? And
right.
It got a lot of attention, and next thing you knew, public service announcements were coming. Then there were a lot of different organizations set up taking in donations, and it really put a forward movement to try to beat that and cure that. That's what needs to happen here. You really need people to speak up. Look what Angelina Jolie just did about getting that surgery.
Oh, yeah,
woman,
so important.
And her family was more important. Her living her life as long as possible was more important than a physical attribute that is over-sensationalized in the press. And everyone has to applaud her for doing that, and that's exactly what happened. Now, many people in that same situation are saying, if she can do it, so can I.
All right.
I hope Nigella Lawson takes the lead and does that as well.
We're going to take a call from Rob, who's calling from Long Island. Rob, do you have a question?
Yes, Judith. This is your friend Rob.
Oh, hi, Rob.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, it's not about domestic violence, but it's about women's equality. I don't quite understand where women want equal pay, equal rights, and all this, and yet they, in my job, they want the doors held open for them. They want assistance with their luggage. They want, things like that. How can women want these extra little perks? Even like, when we're on the employee bus at work, can you help me with my bag? It's so heavy, It just doesn't make sense to me.
So what's the question?
Do you believe that it off balances women wanting these extra little perks because they are women? Do you think it offsets the balance of equality?
Can I answer that, Judith?
Yes.
I don't think there's anything wrong. It's called respect and it's called courtesy. You know, back in the old days, it was called chivalry. And they say chivalry is dead. You know, it doesn't make one side more equal than the other or getting more of an advantage than the other. Hey, you hold doors open for older people. You help them across the street because they have a disability. You do things that are good.
And you're stronger than they are, and you can lift the bag.
Hey, what's wrong with opening the door for a woman and let her pulling out her seat for her? I call that, good manners, and I call that being courteous.
Yeah, to your fellow.
By and large, as women become more, to the extent that they get equality in the workplace and equality in social and legal situations, they are less inclined to expect or to even accept. I, by and large, don't even accept if somebody wants to stand up and give me their seat unless I really have something hurting me and I need to sit down.
Right.
I don't consider that something that I ought to have. And increasingly, women are like that. We to the extent that we feel equal and empowered, we behave that way.
Okay, in terms of that, and you say, Laurel, that it's a gender issue. And as the genders change and as women become more enlightened and feel that they're more equal, will we see more domestic violence in the other direction? Will the genders kind of trade places? Do you see any of that happening at any point?
Well, we've not seen any of it. We've been watching the statistics for a long time, and it doesn't seem to be happening. It does seem to be largely male versus female, about 85%. And I think as women become more equal, it does create, if anything, what it's done is it's made men angrier because they start to feel a little diminished in their power. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was a piece of that fight between Saatchi.
Oh, sure, because she's more famous than he is.
More famous. She's got a different kind of celebrity. It's not based on the money that he's used for his art. And that's probably a dynamic. We do see a particular kind of increase in domestic violence where women have asserted themselves. So women need to know that they have to always be alert and, frankly, do safety planning. What the O.J. case taught us is that when a woman leaves for good, she's taking a very big risk with some men. And we always, when a woman calls us and tells us she's in an abusive situation and she's not sure what to do, and it sounds to us like she needs to leave, we say to her, the first thing you must do is make a safety plan. You know where you'll go, you have your documents with you, you have critical information, and you have a safe place to go where he can't find you. And so I think that's the more likely pattern, is that the men become more violent because they feel frustrated. Who the heck is she?
Right.
She's such a big shot.
What do you make of the women like Jodi Arias? Is she just a psychopath who brutally murdered her ex-boyfriend?
Yeah.
Aberration, psychopath? What do you think?
I do think so in situations like that, but it's hard to know. You know, you look at it in any situation, you kind of have to know the results. I mean, you have to look at the history between them and find out what happened. But we have had situations, not common, but we were involved in one particular case where in New York City, where a woman who had gone through some very brutal abuse over a period of time, the last act of which her husband raped her when she was 9 months pregnant, but his raping was always quite brutal, where she did kill him. And in those kind of situations, you wonder, I mean, was she a psychopath that she killed him? No. You know, she reacted to the extreme abuse. So it depends on the situations.
Right. Adam Thompson, did you follow the Jodi Arias case?
I did, and I think that's an aberration of character.
Yeah.
I mean, abuse is abuse, but someone who stabs someone and shoots them multiple times and basically decapitates them, that's way beyond even the worst conduct you can imagine. So there's not a lot of people like Jodi Arias running out there.
Right.
I agree with that.
All right. Well, listen, thank you both for being here. Laurel Eisner, who's the executive director of Sanctuary for Families. Check it out, www.sanctuaryforfamilies.com, or you can give them...
.org, not
.org.
.org,
sorry.
nonprofit.
.org. And Adam Thompson, criminal defense attorney, thank you both for enlightening us. And we will be right back with more, so don't go away.
Hide your head sand, little girl. Catch you with another man, that's the end.